Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shellcross. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley. Mark, how are we doing over there at GC?
GC's doing good, but what we need from our audience is some reviews. We haven't gotten reviews in a long time. So I know I ask him for them at the end of the show, and maybe you might cut it by then, but free content, free service. We need to get reviews to grow the show. So on our iTunes, we haven't had good review. We have all great reviews, don't get me wrong, but we have solid reviews on there in some time. So if you could help us plug a 5-star review, if you listen over on any of the other podcast platforms, please leave us a review. And that helps us get recognized and picked up by more potential listeners, and it gets put into more people's feeds. So help us out with that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and just take it one step further. Like, that's how we get, like, if we're going to ask like the David Greens in the world that we've had on, or like the Neil Bawas, like the first thing their publicists they ask is, what are your downloads? What are this? Like those stats are actually kind of important to help bring in, larger scale guests to augment some of the local ones we have here. So please help us, and we'll keep expanding and keep providing valuable content.
Nice
and easy. What you want to go right into housing provider tip of the week? Yeah,
let's go right into housing provider tip of the week. So what we're doing here at GC is we're getting ready for winter in our maintenance department. Our maintenance department is getting ready for it. We have those 4 to 6 weeks that not always consecutively, but they're just like kick the crap out of you as a property management company, whether it be the heavy snows or it's usually when the deep cold comes in. But frozen pipes. So a lot of you listeners have bought a building in the last year, and you haven't gone through that first winter yet. So make sure, I won't give you a full checklist, but make sure that you have walked around your property, and make sure that if you have a crawl space, make sure that the pipes that you have in your crawl space are wrapped. Make sure if you have a common area in a basement and the pipes are exposed, make sure you have airflow and proper ventilation, but yet not too much where it's cold and you're going to actually get frozen pipes. So take a look at your building and kind of give yourself a assessment on how you're going to bear on those 2 to 3 like deep, like 40 below zero weeks that we get here in Chicago. Usually doesn't happen in February, but it could happen as soon as December. One other thing that we started doing this week is setting the notice out on the hose spigots on the side. Make sure that your hoses are disconnected for your tenants. Make sure all those things, because those turn into pretty easy pipe breaks that on your spigot inside. So make sure your place is winterproof. No, you don't want frozen pipes. Once they're frozen, that's it. It's a big issue.
Yeah, whatever you can do to be proactive there.
And we'll talk later about not unfreezing them too fast and all those things later on as the winter gets closer, as further tips.
All right, I like it. Nice little cliffhanger.
All right, man. I'm excited about this topic today because we have not really talked about this. This word. Mold is a 4-letter word, I know, around our office, and a lot of property owners run the other way when they hear this word. We'll actually talk about how properties with mold or things you're looking at buying, there could potentially be opportunities. So we'll go over that in the show today. So our guests today, they're the owners of Mold Man USA, and we have Greg Bukowski. He's the founder and co-owner of Mold Man USA. He grew up in Southern California and went to college at Northwestern University. That's how he ended up here in Chicago. He became friends with his business partner, Devin Renberg, who is also on the show today. And Devin is the CEO and co-owner as well. He was born and raised in Tulsa. So we got a good Southern boy here on the show. He also went to Northwestern, is where they crossed paths, and ultimately 20 or so years later, here we are on the show all together. So without further ado, Greg, Devin, welcome to the show. Is there anything as far as intro goes that we cut you short on, or anything that you want to add to that?
No, that's about it. Very good. You left it kind of vague with the 20 so years later. Yeah, it's
or so. You guys distinct right. Measuring things in decades these years.
Yeah,
these days. But yeah, you guys met in college. You guys have a really interesting story. You guys have a passion for your business, and your business is usually something that is dreaded by most people. So you guys developed this passion through first being investors. Kind of tell us, give us the 2-minute version of how you guys came together and what you guys experienced, and how you ended up opening this company, and why you guys just look at it in a different way than most people do.
Yeah. So I'll start this one out, Devin. So, after college at Northwestern, we kind of went our separate ways. I went back to Los Angeles, near where I'm from. I worked for a football team, USC Trojans. We won a couple of national championships when I was there. That was exciting and a great job. But I interacted a lot with the donors. And the donors, most of them were like property owners. I mean, they were the big boys who were donating money to the program. And I just kind of, I don't know, got to talking to them and realizing I was working really hard for not much money. Man, I need to get into this property game, like buying units and fixing them up, and I want to be a property mogul. So I was talking to Devin about it. He was working a job in Chicago. He was in like IT space, and I don't know, we were both entrepreneurial. We decided to get into to open up a little real estate business. Devin, tell him about the timing of that. That was some interesting timing there for us.
Yeah, so we started in the real estate game in 2006. We were really excited. Greg had just moved here from California, and we were single and hungry, and we started buying real estate property in 2006. We didn't know at the time it was the peak of the bubble, so we were buying properties at the absolute peak in challenging neighborhoods, the most challenging neighborhoods in Chicago, cutting our teeth, and it was an experience for sure. We accumulated quite a few units eventually, but we bought at the absolute worst time. And
What neighborhoods were you buying in?
Englewood, Roseland, all over the South Side.
Gotcha.
You guys are still standing though. So a lot of people didn't make it through that. How were you able to hang on? Like, I'm sure it wasn't pretty, but and you eventually transitioned to the mold business, but you still had the properties. How were you able to manage and survive?
Devin, I don't know. I look back and I wonder the same thing. I think it was just a lot of hard work. We'd go down 3 a.m. We had an alarm go off. We'd go down there, investigate ourselves. Like, a lot of it was done ourselves. We realized that, like, I think for us, outsourcing ended up costing a lot of money. So we ended up doing a lot of the many different tasks of property management ourselves. And in the process, learned a lot and saved a lot of money, I think. And we only outsourced when absolutely necessary. So I think that really was a big turning point for us, where we realized, okay, we got to keep the cost down to make money here. Because this, it can be thin margins sometimes,
Yeah. So how does this transition to the mold business? Let's hear how we pivot.
All right. So this is kind of funny. So I remember this day so well, Devin. So Devin and I had one property down in the South Shore neighborhood. And we kind of liked it. And we were thinking about another property down the block, a couple of houses down. So we're thinking about buying that property. So we go and we're investigating the property, and we see that there's a pretty decent sized mold issue there. And Devin and I knew nothing about mold. And, 4-letter word, mold is very scary. Most people are, not comfortable dealing with mold. And we were the same way. So we basically called in a mold guy, and this guy comes. I'll never forget this. He comes. He rolls up. He had a nice car. I think it was like a luxury car. I think it was a Lexus, but it was like a nice Lexus. He had like a vanity license plate and stuff. And he rolls up, and he comes in, and we hired him to do like a mold inspection, mold investigation. And he comes in, and he was literally there for, it had to have been like no more than 15 minutes. I want to say closer to 10 minutes. And he's like, you guys got mold here. Yeah. That'll be $400, and we were just kind of in shock, and at how quickly he diagnosed the issue and how quickly he charged us. And I remember thinking, I didn't have a side job at the time, really. I was waiting tables, and I was like, oh man, I need to get into this business. This is a nice little business because, I don't know, I knew I could do better than him. I knew if that's the competition, I could do better than that guy, because I don't know, I felt kind of ripped off, and I just was like, it was a bad experience, and I could do better than this guy. So that's essentially how we got into it. I ended up doing it as a side gig. We were doing our real estate investment as our main business, but Devin had a side job working in IT, and then I started doing the mold as a side gig, and pretty quickly it grew into a legit small business. I started getting calls, and I was doing these mold inspections, and people liked the way I was doing things, and then they were And I was just going to do inspections. Then they said, well, hey, this inspection is great, but can you help me fix the problem? And I was like, yeah, I guess so, And so then I started scrubbing the mold and really it just, I don't know, it was a really classic story of like business growing little by little and eventually needing help and hiring helpers. And then Devin came on board and because the business was growing and I needed help. And yeah, that's kind of how we got started was directly related to property management, because we knew these property managers and property owners and investors needed a better provider than what was out there.
So that's awesome. So one more thing I want to hit on is, how did you get yourself up to speed, right? This was a subject you didn't know anything about. What did you do to say, you know what, I will know enough where I can be trusted to give an inspection and, get referral business out of it because I'm doing a good enough job?
Yeah. So they, different states have different rules about getting licensed and certified. So Illinois actually is one of the less strict states. You really just need to get certified, and getting certified wasn't that hard. I took an online course for several weeks. Then I took some all day or all weekend classes, or week-long in-person classes. So it didn't take too long. Like, it wasn't years. It was probably a matter of 3-4 months or something before I got the certifications I needed. But more valuable than that was just kind of the having the experience from my time being in the property investment business, was just kind of having seen these different scenarios where mold is common, and just having learned how to like navigate through them without breaking the bank. So I think I brought a lot of that knowledge to the customers, and I think they just kind of liked that I had the like technical knowledge, but also the practical knowledge as well. I think that's how it kind of went.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little about from the investor angle, right? Everyone wants to prevent mold. What are the key conditions like needed for mold to grow? Like what are some things that cause it that we can proactively look to shut down before we have to call someone like yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, God, there's, we've done thousands of mold jobs over the years, but it's often the same few scenarios. I was listening to your podcast from, a few podcasts ago. You talked about the backflow, those backflow valves to like to help prevent basements getting flooded. I think that's, tremendous when it comes to mold. A lot of our work is flooded basements. I mean, in Chicago area, these basements flood all the time. And, you've got 6 inches of water in your basement, and, that's pretty much going to be a scenario where you're going to have to do a flood cut and rip out half that basement. It's very difficult to clean that without doing a lot of demo there. So, anything you can do to prevent flooded basements, I highly recommend. Also like sump pumps, making sure your sump pumps are working, and even a battery backup. Make sure that sump pump doesn't go out when in the middle of a storm when you need it most. I think it's worth the battery backup system. And then just, I would say, is preventative maintenance. Like caulking. People don't think about doors and windows, but that's how the water gets in. And you probably need to do that every 5 years or so, because that caulk goes bad. I don't know, if pipe leaks, making sure those connections are good, and making sure you're using kind of the heavy duty plumbing connections and stuff. Like I remember we used a lot of the little PVC, and because it was cheaper. And I don't know, I think it's worth going with the heavier duty stuff because it'll prevent water damage down the line, and mold, water damage and mold.
So I get this question all the time. Is there like a rule of thumb for if a basement gets 6 inches of water, you have to cut X amount of square feet of drywall up, or you have to treat like what you're smiling because I'm sure you guys get that too.
Yeah.
But what's like the rule of thumb you should follow when you get a wet basement?
Sure. So the general rule in our business is 2 feet. You want to cut 2 feet beyond how far the water went up. So if you've got 6 inches of water, that would probably be an argument for like a 4-foot flood cut. If you just got a couple inches, then I'd probably do just the 2 foot. I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly 2 feet. As long as it's approximately 2 feet beyond where the water went, you want to make that cut. So yeah, 2 foot, 4 foot is the most common. And then sometimes you got to do like the full gut basement. If the water's been sitting for a long time, we do a lot of those too, where it's like a pool in there for several months. We've dealt with that many times as well.
Talk to us a little about, let's say I'm looking to buy a property. So there wasn't a recent flood. I'm looking to purchase a property. How can I tell if they've had this issue in the past and haven't done anything about it, right? Because a typical inspector will notice very obvious things. But how do you actually know if there's mold, behind the drywall there? Or is there any way to know without cutting?
I wish there was a way to know, but there's really no way to know without cutting. You can look for some signs, maybe some like water marks or something, but people are pretty good at hiding that. They'll just throw a fresh coat of paint on top of things. I would say, follow your nose. If it smells musty or something, that is cause to that deserves further investigation. If it's a beautiful looking basement and it's dry and you don't smell anything, then I'd say you're probably going to be okay there. But if there's anything that sets you off, or you've got any kind of hunch that something might have happened there and something might be wrong there, then I would investigate further. And really, just unfortunately, cutting is the only way, really.
Got it. So do you guys ever get involved then on a purchase? So I don't own the building yet. I want to protect myself. I'm very concerned about this. I see one of those triggers you just mentioned, because I assume that there's going to be hesitancy from the seller to say, yeah, go cut my drywall, right? There's no advantage to him to saying, yes, go do that.
Exactly. So, yeah, so a lot of our business is real estate transaction related. I would say at least 50%. There's some kind of transaction going on. Someone's buying, someone's selling, and either mold was found in the inspection, or somebody just wants like peace of mind. So they'll come and they'll call us for a mold inspection. We charge for that. It involves testing and like an investigation of the house. We have testing machines. We'll test the air. We'll do some direct sampling. We got some tools that we use. They're very accurate. I would say not always 100%. I mean, sometimes you can't find the hidden mold, but for the most part, if you've got any doubts, hiring a mold guy who has a lot of experience, like they'll investigate a little bit further and probably won't have to cut open the drywall. They'll probably be able to look for things and see things that kind of tell the buyer or whatever, okay, I think there's something going on here. You might want to ask if we can cut open the drywall or whatever. So, I guess to answer that question, you don't always have to cut it open. Hiring a professional can avoid that. Like we can spot some things that most people won't see.
Got it. So this is almost like a piggyback to your inspection. Like you can have people look at the sewer, like specialists for that, specialists for termite, but you can hire an actual specialist if your home inspector is not going to take a look specifically, right?
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, I want to try to save people money as much as possible. But yeah, if you've got like a hunch that something's going on, then I would recommend hiring a mold inspector because it's a big investment and you just want to make sure that what's going on there. I mean, mold isn't necessarily a reason to not buy a property. In fact, I think properties with mold can be great opportunities, but you definitely want to know what's going on so that you can maybe try to get the seller down on price and stuff,
So there's always a source though. We've talked about that a little. There's always a source for that smell. There's always a source for that discoloration on the wall. There's always a source. And I think a lot of people skip that. I know I see it all the time where they want to skip right to like, let's get the guys out there to remove the moldy wall or the discolored wall. It's like, whoa, it's only going to come back if we don't figure out the source. Like you got to figure out where that caulk is missing and all that stuff. So I just want to make sure you highlight out to listeners that that there's always a source. There's always a root cause. And sometimes it can be tough to determine if it is a finished basement and it's behind the wall somewhere, because then you almost have to go from the outside inside. So just kind of keep that in mind, everybody, when you're looking at these things. There's a source of water or moisture getting into your space. We had a few weeks ago where we had took over a new property, and in the furnace room there was discoloration, but it was because there was a leak that was rolling about 10 feet from the front of that closet into this furnace room. We had to do that before we could go really rectify the issue. So
yeah,
that was my ramble there.
Right. Mold and water go hand in hand. They're connected 100%. You're not going to have a mold problem without a water problem, essentially a water source that's causing that mold issue. And you're right. You can't just cut out the mold and clean it and slap the drywall back on. That would be foolish, because it's just probably going to come back within a matter of months or weeks or whatever. So you got to find that source, just like you said.
People do that. So buyers beware. Like you're saying, it's tough to tell sometimes because they slap the coat of paint on there, but it's always important to look for. So I always look for in the basements, in the door jambs. So in the doorway of like a door, there's usually, you can see like they might have painted the trim all around the room, but they always miss the door jamb, right, kind of going around a corner. So you see the little water damage. So let me go into one other topic. You used the word test before. You guys can do testing. They sell test kits at Home Depot. I feel they scare the hell out of me, and I always discourage our team from taking part of those. Like, talk to us about what you could buy at the store versus what a professional like you guys do when it comes to testing.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Those tests, you can buy them at Home Depot. They are really, really terrible. I don't recommend them at all. I would say they're a waste of money. They'll So what they do is they're essentially a petri dish. You'll kind of like lay them out in whatever room you're wanting to test, and eventually mold is going to grow there. But here's the problem. There's mold in every space, even the cleanest spaces possible. Even the breath that you just took has some amount of mold in it. There is mold in the air, and even the cleanest of properties. And I can put one of those petri dish tests in my own apartment, which I keep very clean, and it will grow mold. But that doesn't mean there's a mold problem. It just means that some of the random mold spores that are floating around in my clean apartment space landed on the petri dish and grew mold. So you need to, those tests tell you what types of mold are in that space, but that's really only half of the the answer that you're looking for. You really need to know how much mold is in that space. And you really can't do that without one of these tests, these air tests that a mold professional will do. You're essentially testing if the mold in that space is higher than normal. You're going to compare it to the outdoor fresh air. If it's significantly higher, okay, that's evidence of a mold issue. If it's significantly lower, that's evidence that there is no issue. And like those petri dishes, they don't tell you that, which is really the key bit of information.
The other thing too is, okay, let's say there's a mold problem. Those tests aren't going to tell you how to fix it. You still need some guidance and expertise on how to address it. So it's a matter of that they're not going to tell you how to interpret it and tell you how to address the problem.
True.
So you said that though, there's always mold in the air, or there's some sort of particles, or you could always petri. That brings me back to sophomore year of biology. Petri, or dropping them and breaking them and stuff like that. But if there's always in the air, is that a direct correlation with levels of humidity? Is that something that can reduce that if you reduce the humidity? I'm not trying to lead you on any answer here. I'm just trying to understand the relationship between humidity and kind of growth in the air. Yeah,
no, that's a good point. So like, for example, in Chicagoland, the summers are humid. You're going to see higher normal amounts of mold in the air, both outside and inside your house. And in the wintertime, when it's very dry, you're going to see lower levels of normal mold. So, it is correlated with the humidity that's like outside and in your home. That brings up a good point. you really want to keep your home as dry as possible. We like dehumidifiers a lot. Running the air conditioning and heating, that dehumidifies the home. But in basements, I love throwing an extra dehumidifier in there just to keep that basement nice and dry as possible. You want to set it like 50% or less on the setting of the dehu, so that you don't get a humid basement, and that does help the conditions for mold growth is being too humid.
Got it. So you mentioned the humid summers. You mentioned, our old school basements that are pretty friendly to water. Like, given all this, compared to other parts of the U.S., is Chicago? I mean, Chicago's probably a good place for you guys to be in business, I guess. Is this? Are we? If you guys go to like some national mold conference, are we? Up there with like, man, the changing of the seasons, we see bigger problems than you'd see in the Sun Belt or in other places.
No, you're absolutely right. It's true. Chicago is a good place for mold. I'm not gonna lie. We've I don't know. We got lucky being in the mold business in Chicago, I guess. But yeah, the Midwest. You've got older homes. You've got some aging infrastructure. You've got basements that are 50, 75 years old, and you get a lot of water intrusion. It rains a lot. The groundwater. The ground is soaked a lot of times. And you got the freeze and thaw cycles and stuff. There's just so many opportunities for water to get into the home in the Chicagoland area. You'll see that in the Northeast as well, but basically anywhere from like Chicago all the way over to, the New York, Eastern Seaboard. Those are ripe climates for mold. You'll see it a lot in the Southeast as well. Like a lot of these conferences we go to, there's a lot of Florida guys, a lot of Louisiana guys, down there. But yeah, no, not as many from Arizona and Nevada and stuff like that. Although there are mold companies out there. There's, anytime you get water leaks, plumbing leaks, whatever, that can be mold. But yeah, Chicagoland is for sure. It's a big issue, definitely.
So one thing in my investor journey, I realized especially with these 120-year-old buildings where we're trying to put that legal or illegal garden apartment in these buildings. First off, they're below ground. Second off, they have little ventilation. A lot of times the openings are a lot less than it might be on the first or second floor. One thing that we try to do is, to invest in that central air, even if it's for that garden apartment. So keep something in mind. Most of your C and D class neighborhoods, you're not putting central air. So that's one reason why this is going to be that much bigger of an issue if you're investing in Inglewood versus Glen Ellen. So keep that in mind. But we've actually invested in putting AC in garden units only in particular buildings, just because we had higher issues with these type of problems. And then at the same time, some of the residents we have in the neighborhoods, they don't they let it get humid. They don't tell us there's a problem until it's too late. So we try to prevent that by having that AC. So I imagine you guys are seeing something similar with having AC units versus non-AC unit type buildings as far as where problems persist. Or vacant buildings.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like you said, those garden apartments, they can be, from what I remember, they can be great income producers for you. But my recommendation would be, just like you said, invest the extra money up front to minimize water issues later, because those are the below grade units. You're gonna get water, but try to keep it to a minimum. The check valve to prevent the flooded basement, the AC to keep it nice and dry, make sure you got some nice insulation. And another thing I would recommend is the dry. I don't like carpet in those units. I really love tile. I don't know if you can just lay tile on top of that concrete in the, the concrete subfloor or whatever in the basement, and then just throw some rugs or whatever on top of that to warm it up, keep it warm. But like, I don't know, I've seen people do wood and which is bad, carpet, and even like, what's that, like the vinyl plank or whatever. There's nothing beats like straight up old school ceramic tile in those units. You'll save yourself a lot of money if you get a flood, if you've got tile.
If you are putting carpet in your basement garden unit, then you need to start back on episode 2 and listen again about why the hell you should not be doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Carpet can get nasty. Like a carpet flooded with sewage is Oh yeah, it's not fun.
Here's your teaser.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we walk into a building, we see discoloration on the wall. People default to, it must be mold. What are some other things that can potentially be, right? Because it's not always mold.
No, yeah, you're right. It's not always mold. I would say a couple things come to mind. The one that we deal with a lot, we get a lot of calls about this, is this stuff called efflorescence. It is these calcium deposits, mineral deposits. You'll see them on more on like brick walls or concrete foundation walls in basements. Like, you enter into a basement and you see this kind of like white looking chalky kind of material, and mold can be white as well. I mean, it's not always dark green or black, whatever. It can be white. And a lot of people think it's mold, but in fact, it's just these mineral deposits, this efflorescence that's been left behind from water slowly leaching through that masonry wall and then just evaporating off, and it leaves behind these mineral deposits. Those are pretty easy to clean. You can Google that. It's like, it involves, it's some type of acid. You can buy it at Home Depot. It's not very expensive, but that's not mold. That's efflorescence. And the other thing I see is just some like old water staining. Like you might see some dark, you might see where there was some water, but it didn't, it got dried up quickly. It didn't turn into a mold problem. And you just might see some like light brown kind of discoloration. That's not necessarily mold. That could be there where there was a water leak and they acted quickly, dried it up, cleaned it up. What I found is that most mold problems are fairly obvious. You'll get that, it'll smell bad, it'll look bad. Most of the time you'll know it if you've got a real mold problem.
All right, I got a question. This came up the other day and I didn't know how to answer it. Like what's black mold and how's that compared to like regular mold? Like what, either one or whoever wants to take that answer, like give us the 101 as far as if somebody just never knew what either, like just kind of break that down.
Sure. I'll take this one, Devin. I deal with this a lot. So it's kind of interesting. In our industry, in the mold industry, they teach us not to focus on black mold or any color of mold. Basically, the rule in our industry is mold does not belong in a healthy home, no matter what kind of mold it is. There's no good mold. There's no bad mold. Like mold just really doesn't belong in a healthy home. Treat it all the same. And that's true because, okay, black mold causes allergies, but there's lots of other molds that cause allergies as well. So best to just kind of treat it all the same, clean it up, remove it, and so forth. Black mold is a specific type of mold. It's called Stachybotrys. It's one of the more allergenic types of mold that can cause allergic symptoms in a certain percentage of people. Not everyone, just a certain percent, maybe 10-15% of the population. They'll get some coughing, some wheezing, some itchy eyes. And if they're kind of exposed to it for a long time, it could be even worse. I mean, you could get pneumonia and things like that. So our main message is, actually, I think why people like us a lot is we kind of tell our customers, don't panic about the mold situation. There's a lot of this information out there on the internet that causes people to freak out, like all kinds of crazy diseases and so forth. Almost all of that is unproven. What we do know is that it can cause allergies in a certain amount of people, and it can make their lives pretty miserable for those people. I mean, imagine you're living in a home and you're dealing with these constant allergies. Like that's terrible. But that's the reality for certain people. And black mold is just one of the many other types of mold that can cause these allergies. Best not to focus on it or focus on color at all. It's really just any type of mold, treat it all the same, get rid of it.
With the sources for any type, you said many types of mold, whether it be black mold, other types of mold. Again, back to moisture and water issue. The source is something liquid or something water driven, correct?
Yeah.
So no matter what the source, it's not this type of mold grows on special drywall.
Exactly. Like no. It's like there's black mold spores floating around in all of our apartments right now. It just depends on which spore landed on that wet drywall at that time and started to grow a colony. It really doesn't really matter the place, the drywall or whatever different type of material. It's sort of like happenstance by chance. I guess I don't know if I answered that well, but it really doesn't matter what it grows on.
We'll take it. We'll take that answer. Not a problem.
Okay.
The other
All right,
thing,
cool. So, Devin, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say that the mold comes in all colors of the rainbow, and just there's more than one type of mold that is black. So there's no such thing. I mean, there's black mold, but there's not a one black mold. Like there's many. So you really can't even tell what kind of mold you're looking at just by looking at it. So it's all treated the same. It's all caused by water. So the color really isn't important.
So, Devin, what I took from that is really no one knows what the hell they're talking about except guys like you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, unless you get it tested, you don't know exactly what type of mold it is. And a lot of times we tell people, and this is another reason why they like, it's like, we don't even necessarily think testing is something that should be done all the time. And that's going to cost, $300-400. If you know you got a mold problem, why don't you save that $300 and apply it towards actually fixing the problem? You don't need to know the exact type of mold that it is anymore. In our industry, all mold is treated the same. Just apply that money to getting rid of it.
Gotcha. Okay. One more question, then we'll head to wrap up. All right. Take your I own a mold company hat off and put your I am a landlord hat on. So what's your good advice for when a tenant calls up and says, I got mold? How do you recommend landlords respond to that?
Sure. Devin, I'll give my piece first.
Yeah.
So we see this all the time. We don't like it, but unfortunately we find ourselves in the middle of these landlord tenants disputes a lot, and it can get pretty heated sometimes. And we're kind of like the man in the middle and the arbitrator in some cases. But what I've noticed the most common is the tenants, they get most upset, not necessarily at the mold, but at like the attitude of the landlord. Like if the landlord is very aggressive and like kind of instantly blames the tenant and you're sloppy and this and that, and then they like don't even do anything about the problem for several weeks, that creates this tremendous amount of resentment in the tenant, and things can escalate very quickly from there. So and that's never good. I don't know. What I've seen is that like usually these tenants win. I mean, they have a lot of the laws, written to back up the tenant. And the tenant, if they decide not to pay rent, that's a really bad situation. Like you kind of want to keep the tenant happy from what I've seen. And that means basically the landlord being responsive. Like, okay, the tenant calls, hey, there's a mold problem. Okay, don't just blow the guy off for 3 weeks. Say, okay, I'm sorry to hear that. Let me come check it out. And you be there within a day or two, take some pictures, you want to be collecting some evidence. And then, maybe they can clean it up themselves, the landlord. Or if they, maybe they hire somebody, but don't wait too long, because like I said, the tenants, they get up all these, they freak out. Then they start Googling mold on the internet. Like the quicker, the better, that's my advice. Act quickly.
Do something better than trying to figure out the perfect solution is what I heard there.
Yeah. Devin, you got anything else to add on that, or?
Man, we had quite a few units. I remember those days, and the key is to be available and responsive and show you care. And I think, most people are reasonable, but you just have to be on top of it. The ones that are, it's always, when we get the call from the landlord, we know the situation, okay, this is a responsible landlord usually. When we get the call from the tenant, it usually means that the landlord hasn't done anything, and that's when there's a problem. So, just be on top of it and be communicative with the tenants. And remember, it's going to be, if there is a mold problem, it's going to be caused by a water problem. And the tenant is probably dealing with this for the first time, and they don't know anything about mold. And they probably think, if they've got kids, they're probably really concerned because they're thinking they're probably reading these things on the internet that are not true. So that, it's good to have some basic knowledge and be able to have to be able to explain it to them, but to be very proactive. So you're not ignoring them. No one likes to be ignored, right? So that's the main advice. Be on top of it.
So whether you have a property manager or self-managing, I hear what you guys are saying, just empathy and responsiveness as far as getting that done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I've seen the wars between the tenants and the landlords. It doesn't usually go good for the landlord from what I've seen.
Not Chicago, not with the tenant ordinance. Not that's going to be a tough one to win.
Yeah. All right, cool. Tom, you ready to wrap?
Let's do it.
All right, guys, we got a series of 6 questions here. You guys can both answer them. Being 2 of you, keep a little shorter. Don't run on it, so we don't lose our ADD listeners.
Sure.
But you guys are in an industry with lots of competition. How have you guys been able to do this while leaving kind of your competition in the dust in a way?
Devin, you take this one.
Oh, that one. I'd say there's a few things. I'd start with the basics. I mean, we hammer the basics. Answer the phone, show up on time, be responsive, own your mistakes, look professional, and to do it consistently. See, when you're going against other competition, they can do it when they're slow, but when they get busy, are they still doing those things? Are they still showing up on time? Are they still responsive? We emphasize that on day one for every employee. No scare tactics and do the basics. And that literally in the contracting space will get you ahead of most of the competition. And our mission is no scare tactics, the truth only, which makes us very contrarian. So that also is good, but hammer the basics. Anyone can do the basics sometimes, but to do it day after day, 365, that's harder.
Great. Greg, anything to add?
No, Devin nailed it. Yeah, just the basics. It's amazing. Like a lot of the competition can't handle that. So we look amazing, even though we're just kind of doing what we consider basic stuff. But hey, I'll take it.
Nice.
The same principles can be applied to investing, right? It's show up every day and just keep showing up.
Yeah.
So, all right, you guys have already provided a ton of advice, but what is one specific piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in the Chicagoland area?
Ooh. That is a good question. The thing that immediately comes to mind is just how many different water issues there are in the Chicagoland area. So, when you're looking at that property, take a look at that basement, take a look at the attic. And a lot of times we deal with moldy attics all the time. Be ready to deal with water issues. I mean, you can buy the most amazing house, well-built house or apartment building, but you're going to get water issues at some point. I would say be mentally ready for it, and just kind of keep an eye on it, on those things, and nip them in the bud before they become serious problems where you've got, like major flooding,
Gotcha. All right, cool. What do you guys each do for fun?
Oh man, I play tennis. Devin plays a lot of tennis too, but I'm a tennis junkie. I play tennis as much as I can. I don't know. Work stresses me out and tennis de-stresses me. So tennis.
We got quite a few battles on the tennis court, Greg and I. So I love tennis and anything food related. Play tennis and eat. I like to.
It's a good life.
Yeah, I like to read. I'm doing less of that now, but
you got to get me and Tom. I will do a 2v2.
Okay.
I always want to play game of tennis. Most I've done is Mario Tennis on mine, but I do. Okay. It always seems competitive and fun.
Yeah.
All right. So it sounds like Devin, you're the reader, but what's a good book, podcast, or self-development activity that you would recommend to our listeners?
I love the podcast, How I Built This.
Oh,
yeah.
Man, that podcast is like, I don't miss an episode. It's on, I think, NPR, and he interviews a entrepreneur every week who started from the ground up. And he's just a really good interviewer. He had a lot of journalism experience before, but man, you get so much inspiration. And he'll ask tough questions, and you'll see all the things that these people go through, and kind of demystifies that the entrepreneur is just born and it just comes so easy. It doesn't. every single episode has, man, everyone goes through Herculean challenges. Greg and I have so many war stories to tell you. So I would listen to that. I wouldn't miss an episode. It's so good.
Yeah, it's mostly name brands, too. And you don't realize that 25 years ago, they came from nothing.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting. All right. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network you'd highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource.
Ooh. Well, Ryan Smith comes to mind. He's a customer of ours. I've known him for years. He is with Remax. He deals with foreclosure properties, and a lot of these foreclosures end up having mold issues. So we'll come in there and clean it up a lot of times to get them kind of ready for sale. I don't know, he knows what he's doing. If you're looking for a foreclosure property, I would say check out his listings, Ryan Smith, Remax, Remax.
Yeah, no, you couldn't have plugged him any better. If you go on our website, you could enter your email and start getting lists of REO properties. Ryan's actually, shout out to Ryan for being the person that introduced us to you guys. So we're very grateful for that.
I'd add too that I think it's been a big part of our business growth is we got some, we went to the SBA and we got some advice from this group called SCORE. So these are retired executives that have, we've been meeting with for years. And these are people that have done it and seen it, and they give you tough love. So I would say, don't do it alone. Go find some mentors that have actually done it, that it's totally different space, but that SCORE has been a really stands for like Senior Corps of Retired Executives. It's been really, really helpful, and it's free. It's from the SBA.
It's really big in DuPage County and downtown. So it's definitely a great resource. I've been with them too for many years ago.
Awesome. We'll make sure to link to that in the show notes. So thank you guys so much. You provided a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
Oh man. Absolutely. So, our website is moldmanusa.com. They can always check us out. And if you need, book an appointment, save us in your phone as like your mold guys or whatever. I always tell people that, you're going to run across mold at some point. Save us in your cell phone as, mold man, mold company or whatever. Save our website, our email, our phone number. I guess that's it. We do a lot of work for investors. They like us because our prices are competitive and they can count on us. So, we won't let you down for sure.
I'd say just one more thing. I think there's a great opportunity to focus on properties with mold because I think a lot of people are skipping over them. So problems can be addressed and handled pretty effectively, and they're gone for good if you do it right. So if you walk into a place and it's got tons of mold and it's been sitting there for a while, that might be a great opportunity, assuming you're getting that discount, because a lot of investors or people are just going to walk right by it. So there's, especially in Chicago, could be a great opportunity that others are passing over.
I agree 100%. All right. So Mark, first shot at the fact here. So I thought this would be appropriate since we're doing a mold episode. We all know about the Chicago fire, but in recent memory, Chicago also had a great flood where about 250 million gallons of water shut down the loop for 3 days. It cost the city roughly $3 billion in today's dollars. What year was this flood? And would you like multiple choice?
I remember that day. I remember that day. I had a baseball card show in Lombard that day. So I think it was 89 or 91, but give me multiple choice.
All right. Your choices are 88, 92, 97, or 01.
88 might have been too young. So I would say 92.
All right. Greg or Devin, you want to throw in your thoughts as well?
Oh man, I have no idea.
No idea. I'll go with 92.
You guys are transplants.
We're transplants. Yeah. I used to go to baseball card shows too, but it was in California.
92. Mark with the right answer.
I remember it was a Monday afternoon. I totally remember that day. Like it was actually, that was very interesting to me as a little boy that there's tunnels under the city that are flooding. Like I thought that was really cool in itself.
Yeah, it's like Ghostbusters. The fact that there are tunnels under the city.
Yes. That's something I was thinking when I was that age too. So or back then. So yeah, there's actually a good documentary maybe we could link to on that scenario that just came out a few years ago on how that flooded and all the tunnel network. So But all right, thank you. I'll ask again, everyone, hang up and leave us a review. Tom, I got a great idea. We are going to go to I think we've had 87 guests so far, and we're going to make sure they get us reviews this week. So,
all right.
So if you're listening, you're a guest, you've probably been bombarded with us already on leaving us a review, and that's going to go with you, Devin and Greg. So check that out. Check out our website. We got a bunch of pictures there from the 100th episode bash that we had as well too. And we will, Tom, thanks as always. Devin, Greg, great content today. We might have to have you back on for a part 2 of this even as well, because there's probably about another dozen questions I have. But
cool.
Guys, thank you very much. And we will see you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.